One of the first things I would tell a realtor is no one cares about price per square foot. We never use that. No appraiser would ever use that. Certain items don't necessarily add value, even if they're brand new. Putting a new roof on a house doesn't necessarily increase the value either. I've seen the most elaborate sales package before, and it's like...
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast, where we talk about the agent side of real estate investing. We talk about the successes, the lessons, and all in between. My name is Nico Garcia, local real estate agent and investor based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host,
Anna Bialek, Northern Virginia realtor and mostly out-of-state investor.
And today is another special episode. We have another wonderful guest. We're talking about a topic that we've been circling for quite some time. If you know Anna and I, we're looking for somebody to talk about appraisals and have a good appraiser guest. So we have Mike Giampa here today to talk about this topic and go do a deep dive. But welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you.
Awesome. So before we actually go into the topic, we'd love to give you some space to kind of introduce yourself, what you do, where you're located, and what initially brought you into real estate.
Yeah. Like I said, Mike Giampa, Accurate Realty Services. My website is dcmetroappraisals.com. I've been an appraiser my entire life, going on 33 years. It's the only real job I've ever had. I'm also a broker. I've been a broker for about 26 or 27 years. I don't do much on the broker side. I list for friends and family mostly, but it's a great job that has worked well for me.
Awesome. So I guess for those who don't know what an appraisal is, let's go to Appraisal 101, right? So what is a appraisal, Mike?
Oh, whenever you borrow money, the person who's lending that to you wants to know what the asset is worth. It's my job. Tell them what it's worth, and that judges their risk. If it's what we are frequently going to see very soon is the spring market, you'll have lots of contracts be over list price and lots of appraisals that don't meet that new list price. And so potential angry realtors at me. It happens every spring. That's the way the market is.
And I'm sure during the pandemic when homes were going 100K over asking, I'm sure you saw a lot of that, right?
Oh, 100%. Like I was telling you, I have a lot of inspections due tomorrow. I think 4 or 5 BA. Every single listing, the contract price was higher than its asking price. So I haven't done the inspection yet. I don't know if it's going to meet list price or not price to not pull. Still seeing that. And that's all everywhere.
Yeah. So in terms of appraisals, it's a measuring time, right? We talk about it when we're doing our CMAs, our comparative market analysis, and you're going in there, you're looking at, we're speaking specifically about residential appraisals, right? You're going and looking at comps of how a home compares to recently sold. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yeah. In this market, it's pretty imperative to stay as recent as you can. Like to stay within 6 months. You can go up to a year. You can actually go back 2 years. You do what you have to do, but your first three comps, they need to be compliant with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac's guidelines. So like to stay within 6 months to get the most recent comps in there, which usually reflect better values.
Yeah. So what are those guidelines that you say you have to adhere to? Are we allowed to know these secrets?
Oh yeah. There, you can look up Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac lender guidelines. Basically, at least 3 settled sales within a year, within a mile. And then when you have to veer outside of those guidelines, you just have to put an explanation in your appraisal why you had to.
Okay. So early in the spring market, when you get these over asking, when they finally do close, those become your new comps, right? So if you have properties that then go under contract like a month from now in the same neighborhood and their price is pushed up higher, they may actually be better off than the person that sold a month before then. That was based on the old comps.
100%. Absolutely. It is a lot easier to appraise in June than it is in March because you have your spring sales as your comps. versus your early spring contracts, maybe winter comes.
Yeah.
And that's the slowest time. We can make time adjustments that sometimes can make up the difference, but some people don't like using them. It can be problematic for some lenders, but yeah, it's definitely easier to appraise later on in early summer.
So speaking specifically about comps, right? In an ideal world, you find one that's within 3 months, recently sold, similar style, similar bedroom, similar bathroom count. But we all know, at least, Ann and I know we've been in the business. You've been in the business for quite some time. And sometimes it's kind of hard to comp out, right? So during that situation, what do you recommend in terms of, if I'm a listing agent and I'm trying to find like a good solid comp, is there any like pro tips or things that you can do?
If you look at a standard appraisal grid, the very top part of the grid underneath the address is location. That's the first thing I look at when I'm doing an appraisal. I start from the subdivision and I'll work my way out. If I can't find certain things like similarity in year built, size, condition, and if I can find 3 comps in the subdivision that sold within 3 months, whose interior photos look very similar to the subject, those are 3 perfect comps. But in the spring, I'm going to see that, but the prices are going to be higher or a lot higher. And in like certain loans, like the VA loan, I'm not allowed to finish an appraisal if it's going to come in low. I have to alert the lender that there's an issue. And then the lender goes to the listing agent who says, the appraiser needs comps to see if that'll support your contract price. And then
Is that the tide of water thing?
Yeah. So that's actually really beneficial for borrowers and lenders and realtors. It's a great thing, but it actually says in our appraisal, we're not supposed to tell anyone. One of our certifications is we're not supposed to give like a heads up that there may be a value issue. We're just supposed to do the appraisal, but the VA wants it done differently. So that's what we do.
And it is beneficial. I've had that happen, and we were able to get some additional comps in, and we were able to find a couple errors in the appraisal that I was able to point out. And we actually got the appraisal increase. Like the VA tries really hard to like do what they can for their vets to get them into houses.
And you can do that it happens after the fact with conventional FHA. You're just ordering a reconsideration of value. The appraiser still has to consider in writing up to 5 comps why these are better or shouldn't be used whenever there's a challenge to value.
Now, can those be comps that have closed after the appraisal was done, or those all have to be done prior to the appraisal being done?
No, prior. I have done this before. Someone had an appraisal come in low, and then a few days later or a week later, a new sale pops up in the subdivision right next door. Perfect comp. Can you use that? I can, but I have to go re-inspect the subject because the effective date of the appraisal is the day that I'm there when I do the actual inspection. So I do a quick trick fee, go back out, do a quick re-inspection, include the new comps. It could bring up the appraisal to contract price. It could help it, maybe hurt it. You don't know until you look, but generally in those scenarios, I know beforehand, yeah, that comp will probably help. Let's go ahead and do another quick inspection, and I'll put that in the report.
Yeah. So agents and appraisers sometimes have clashes, right? And I'm sure you've had your share of experiences with listing agents.
I'm one of you guys
things
too.
like that. So I'm just curious, like, so if somebody's looking to, list a home for a client or their own home, right? Their job is obviously to look at comparables, right? Look and see what market value makes sense. Other than that, like, I'm curious to what you would, as an appraiser, would value more versus like other comps. I know you mentioned condition and things like that. Is there anything specific that would make your property stand out more? I'm sure there's probably a ton, but is there any that you can think of that?
What adds most value in this market is condition. Actually, I just did a blog on my website about the average cost that flippers use when they renovate homes, because I do a lot of fix and flip appraisals, and they have to send me their budget so I can see what's going to go into this house after it's done, but the appraisals of the house before it's done. So the number one thing is kitchens. And after kitchens, bathrooms, then basement finish, and flooring throughout is a given. That's a pretty cheap upgrade because most fix and flip homes are LVP. And then if exterior wise, porches, decks, patios, things like that, you build a nice outdoor summertime area, that's a nice thing to have.
I was just thinking, like, when you were talking about these rooms and things, it's like, how do you quantify, like, dollar wise, how do you quantify the differences between like a nicely updated one versus one that's a little bit older? Is there like a standard, like, if this one has an extra half bath, it's this amount, or if this kitchen is nicer, like, how do you quantify that in dollars?
Well, yeah, what I like to use is similar homes in bracket a particular feature that I'm looking at. If I have a home that's totally renovated, I'm not going to have 3 comps that aren't renovated in my appraisal and then adjust upward with either an adjustment that I've derived from the market or what I think it's worth. I want to bracket big ticket items to show that this market paid this much for this house that had the same level of upgrade. And that's where we can kind of see that if I have a $700,000 totally renovated house and I have another home that's sold for $740,000, that's similar size, that's renovated, probably not, those upgrades probably aren't going to push it up to that $740,000.
Okay. But then for like an extra bathroom, at least
Sure.
what it seems to me, it looks like there's like a
Right.
standard, like,
We-
K
we-
more.
We use regression for picking out particular items like full baths, decks, porches, pools, things like that. There's software that we can use and augment what we use with finding comps that have similar things. Is called Synapse. That can help pull out adjustments. If you feed enough data into it, feed enough comps into it, it'll say or give you an indication or a range that a full bath in $1 million house might be worth $25,000. And then we can then also use sensitivity, which is what I kind of previously mentioned, where you take 2 similar properties, one lacks a specific item. If that adjustment, that Synapse says that's worth $25,000, you put that $25,000 adjustment in, and then the value supports the subject sale price. There you go. We have 2 forms of adjusting that prove that particular item.
And is that tool specific for appraisals, or is that something that whoever
I think anyone can use it. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a few different tools out there that you can use. You can also come up with your own model using spreadsheets. I've never got into those kind of hardcore feeding 50, 60 comps into a data set to pull out certain adjustments like that. But using bracketing sensitivity, that pretty much is a good way to take care of things like that.
Kind of off topic, but is there like an appraisal class that realtors like can go and sit in and kind of understand how appraisers comp houses? And I'm just curious. Sellers.
There isn't, but there are appraisers who do go around to realtor offices and give like little, quick little seminars on, here's a quick down and dirty way. I used to be a moderator on Ask the Appraiser on Facebook, and I think it's up to like 100,000 people that are on there now. Most of them are realtors who come and ask the same questions over and over, which is fine because you get a lot of new people. But one of the first things I would tell a realtor is no one cares about price per square foot when you're talking about the total, because it totals the entire house. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get into, you're not going to see, well, this house has a 2-car garage. This house has a 4-car garage. The price per square foot is X. So that means something. That includes everything. We never use that. No appraiser has ever used that. If you look at a cost approach in an appraisal, we break out every major item like finished square footage, basement square footage, the land, the site improvements. Same thing on the grid. We're breaking everything out. The price per square foot includes everything in the grid. So it's not a unit of comparison we use. You could basically, if you just looked at enough appraisals that you see in your market, you'll get a good idea. If you're in Montgomery County and you have $500,000, $600,000 townhomes, if you look at enough appraisals, you'll see, well, generally the price per square foot for living area is $70 a square foot. And just keep that in the back of your head, write it down on a little scratch piece of paper. You could do that. That's probably the quickest way.
And yeah, I think a lot of that has been from, I don't know, TV. Because I've had clients that are like, well, what's the price per square foot in this area? I'm like, oh, we don't do it that way. They're like, how did they come up with this amount? And I'm like, they looked at comp. They didn't look at price per square feet. Because telling Manhattan, they're like, this unit is, $500 per square foot. And I was like, we don't do that here. Maybe they do it in New York or other.
Condos are great because that's all you're buying is interior square feet. You don't own anything else. Maybe a garage spot and closet you keep stuff in.
Does lot size, I know you mentioned interior square feet, right? But does lot size really factor in terms of appraisals?
Oh, sure. That's another thing about price per square foot. If you have one property that's on 2 acres, another one that's 1/4 acre, your price per square foot is going to include both lots. So, enough of price per square foot.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of circle back to just the appraisal process in general, right? So for those who haven't bought a home or are looking to buy a home, the first step is, speak with the real estate agent like Anna and I, speak with the lender to get pre-approved. Those are the first 2 steps. And then you start looking at homes, you get under contract, which means the seller agrees to sell the home to you. And then this is where you're doing all your due diligence. You're getting, your home inspection, if you have that as well. And then comes the appraisal, right? Walk us through that process, Mike. How does that look like in terms of time frame, how long it takes, how much does it cost? I know that, and then how long it takes to get back.
Well, I get an order and the first thing I do is research it and pull comps. Then after I get enough for a day of inspecting, I will, if it's a sale, I'll go through showing time. And if it's a refinance, I'll call the borrower and I get my day set and then I'm done. I do the inspections. But when I'm done inspecting, I start typing them up in the order that they came in to get the first ones in, the first ones out. That process from getting the order to getting it out the door for the VA, we're allowed 14 calendar days, 10 business days. We don't generally take that long unless it's really busy. Some lenders are outside of the VA are stricter. Some want it quicker. And then some lenders that work through appraisal management companies, which are the worst. We'll talk about that. They want it even faster and they pay the least. So they attract generally the least talented appraisers because they're really difficult to deal with. The pay, it varies. The VA is $600 on any house, no matter what. You can ask for an increase if it's due to complexity or mileage, depending on how far away it is, but they've never granted it. I've asked for it twice. They've never granted it, so I don't bother. AMCs, they pay as low as $250. If you're doing appraisals for $250, that's you're not
get
gonna
what you pay for.
Yeah, you're not going to get the best and brightest. No, not the brightest, but you're going to get the best. We're going to want to get through with that as quickly as possible and move on.
Yeah.
So lenders that typically use those types of AMCs, those are hard to work with.
And don't worry, we won't hold you to any of those pricing quotes, but it's just something that we want to express to people that are maybe first-time home buyers that those costs are usually upfront costs. I think I know some lenders that might be able to bundle that in their loan, but yeah, what Mike's is saying that $600 or $800 is also separate from a home inspection. So if you're getting a home inspection, that's one cost, and appraisers at a whole different cost. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, typically, brokers will want you to pay your appraisal and your credit report up front. That's to gauge your seriousness to you working with them. There are other lenders who you'll hear on the radio say, no upfront appraisal fee. I guess that's good for some people, but it is what it is.
But you're getting paid no matter what. Like, unlike us as agents, like we can go through all of this, get to the closing table, and then shit hit the fan and we don't get paid. You're going to get paid regardless of whether the deal closes or not, right?
It depends. If you're working with certain AMCs, I don't, thankfully. But if you do, and you get to the property and they cancel, they'll give you a trip fee sometimes no, depending on when they emailed you. But if I finish the report with the lenders that I work with, because they're all upstanding lenders, I do get paid because I've completed my job.
Yeah. Okay.
So what are some common mistakes that you see that kill a deal, other than, pricing it really high?
That's it. It's realtors are really good at pricing homes. They do it every day. But when you list a home for $600,000 and everybody has the expectation, generally, sometimes you see listings that are artificially lowered to drive higher demand. But if you list a property for $600,000 and you get a contract for $640,000, I would assume that most realtors will tell their sellers, don't expect this to come in. We have a financing contingency. An appraisal has to be done. Probably not going to meet that. So, don't start spending your money yet. Wait till the appraisal comes in and we'll see what happens.
So what Mike's talking about is an appraisal, like an appraisal contingency, which is basically saying, hey, if Mike comes in or an appraiser comes in and says the value isn't worth the sales price, then the buyer has the option to either void, renegotiate, things like that. There's a tool that you can use called an appraisal gap, where you're saying, hey, if you're going over asking as a buyer and you're like, hey, I'm willing to cover, let's just say 10,000 if it comes under. So it's different things that you can do to make your offer appealing to a seller if it's a competitive market and you need to do things like that.
Yeah. Do you find, I know agents will give you like a appraisal package with like their comps and stuff. Do you find that useful at all? Or is it just like, yeah, I already did that, thanks. But thanks.
Great question, Anna, because I've done this before, but I'd like to hear what Mike would say.
I have seen the most elaborate sales package before, and it's like, do you have a plat? That's really all I want is a flat. I'm seeing the same comps you are, but no. If I get comps in a plat, I am thrilled to death. I don't need, it doesn't help me to have anything flashy. I'm not going to use it in the report, but the plat is one wish, it's a plat in every packet I ever get.
Well, I just learned something new because I've never given a plat. Now I'm like, wait a minute, I got to find my client's plat, or be like, we need a survey stat, like before the appraiser comes out.
Yeah. That has the exterior dimensions of the house and the lot lines and locations of well and septic. Sometimes you'll have the occasional lender who will say, is the well and septic too close to the house? There's a high voltage transmission line running on the back of the property. What's the fall distance? Are there any easements running through the property? Plat tells you all that stuff. That's the most helpful thing. When we get to the property, we can see what's done. I do say at the end of when I get there, I said, at the end, I'll ask you some questions about your property. But I like to be left alone because if I'm talking with someone, I'll forget to take a picture. It always happens. I forget to pull that picture. Hope we're on MLS. I just do my thing. And then when I'm done, we can talk and then see, is there anything that I can't see that's been done? The sprinkler system, your roof, foundation repair, new septic, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, do you recommend as an appraiser that the owners of the property that are selling it be there? Because I had an appraiser before where he was like, can you just keep them away from me, because they wanted to circle and talk to him and tell him all the wonderful things they've done, and he's like, can you just I don't know, I felt like a linebacker.
No, the most important, actually, the most important thing a realtor can do is get me in there.
Okay.
That's all I want to do is get in and get my inspection done. I don't care if anyone's home. I don't care if there's babies sleeping. I will be as quiet as a church mouse. They will never know I'm there. Please let me get in and inspect it so I don't have to come back a week later. It doesn't matter. If someone has to be there, someone wants to be there, I always tell the people that I'm working with, they don't have to leave. You don't have to tell them to leave. It's totally fun if they want to stay.
Okay. I was going to say, now let Nico ask this question because my brain is going in this direction. You said you were a broker and then you mentioned Showing Time, which is the app that we use for getting into properties, getting into the lockbox, setting up appointments. Is that something that all appraisers have, or did you get a broker's license because there's tools that you utilize on the appraisal side? Like that?
Yeah, I got my realtor license, I think in 97. And I was doing really well. I was like multi-million-dollar agent for a year or two. I like the appraising more. I don't like the uncertainty of showing a bunch of houses and then it not panning out, and that's free. The appraising appealed more to me because I knew if I were as much as I want to, I can make as much as I want to until there's no more time in the day and you try to hire people. Back in 2008, they really changed the laws after the last crash, and they made it much more difficult for people to go into appraising. So it's been a lot better post 2010-ish, I guess, but you basically can just work for yourself. Taking on trainees, that's so hard to do now. And then if somebody already has their certification, why are they going to work with you when they can get their own work? So that's why most appraisers are one-man shops in their 50s or 60s. No one really goes into this profession anymore. Anyway, I got into being a realtor and then eventually a broker because I want to work for myself. I sell maybe a house a year.
Okay.
You can have your central key access with just being a realtor. An appraiser.
Okay.
You just happen to also be a broker.
Okay. That's the part I wasn't sure. I didn't know that you can have Century Lock access because I know you have to be a professional with Century Lock technically you're supposed to be. So you can see who's getting in and out of the house or who has access to the house.
When I inspect in DC and Maryland, I don't belong to those boards up there. So I have to get 1-day codes.
I just want to circle back about best practices for agents or sellers or anybody who hires an appraiser. We talked about having a plat, which would be great. Give them their space to work. They can be in the home, but give them their space. The comp package, they're going to do their own comps.
Just always take comps and always look at what you get. Yeah.
Okay. And then one thing, because I met an appraisal for a remodel project that I did, and I gave him like just a 1-page sheet of all the upgrades that we did because it was like a full remodel. And I was just curious, would you take that?
That's the last thing in the pack that I want to see.
That is the last thing, or like the last thing?
You
do want to see that. Okay.
In a pack. Yeah. The upgrades, anything I usually ask people, what's been done in the last 5 years? That's the last thing I say to them as I leave the house.
Yeah. Awesome.
We know the same Mike's good graces, get a plat, provide the comps you use for pricing the property, and give them the list with the years that things were installed. Do you want the prices too? Like if they have how much they paid for everything, or does that not matter because you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Any data is good data. It's just a matter of if it's pertinent or not.
And that's what I was asking. I didn't know if they gave you we paid $10,000 to replace the HVAC, if that dollar amount is pertinent to your figures, or you just have like a set dollar amount that you would apply to a new HVAC regardless of how much they actually paid for it.
That's actually a good question. Certain items don't necessarily add value, even if they're brand new. You are expected in this area to have an HVAC system, and if you have an old HVAC that failed, you're just bringing it back up to snuff, having a new one. You wouldn't necessarily see an increase in value if you put in a used one or a new one, even a high efficiency one, like a new roof.
Mm-hmm.
If your old roof, unless it is really in poor shape and you're selling a home as a fixer-upper, putting a new roof on a house doesn't necessarily increase the value either. You're just bringing it back up to snuff.
Okay, so your HVAC could be 20 years old, and as long as it's running properly, it doesn't decrease the value either, even if it's a 20-year-old HVAC.
Oh. And specifically, I know you mentioned you work with people that are doing like fix and flip loans and future appraisal loans.
Hundreds and hundreds.
Okay. How does that look? So can you mind explaining like what that looks like and how that process looks? Because, we have a lot of investors that listen to this and they, are interested in like hard money or different ways where you can buy properties with doing value add. How does that process work?
Yeah, even on my website, dcmetroappraisals.com, I do remote appraisals. Remote investor appraisers or appraisals are a little different, but this one lender in particular, they send me pictures of a interior inspection that's been done by someone and a budget on how much the investor is looking to spend and any plans if there's any additions or second level, things like that. I will then do an appraisal based on those pictures of the as-is value and then pretend that all of the repairs and additions have been made. And then I come up with an as repaired value, what are to be worth after it's done. So there's one investor, they allow me to do that remotely. I don't have to leave. And those are cool, but they actually take longer than if I were to just to drive out there and do the inspection itself. So it's not less work, it's not less accurate. It's just they want their appraisal so fast that allows me to save scheduling time, driving time. But the other lenders that I work with who do fix and flips, I will just go out to the property, just take a picture because they're not going to keep the house. And they'll say, this is what we're going to build on it. Tell me what it's worth today when it would be complete in 6 months from now.
Now, Mike, what type of documentation do they need to provide to you to get the future value? Do they need like a full scope of work? Do they need drawings? What do they need to?
Yeah, if they're
justify
going to do additions or anything other than what's there at the time I see it, plans and a budget, which will typically say brand new kitchen, granite countertops, LVP, hardwood floor, things like that. Once they do anything over and above a simple renovation, then I need plans. But if it's just a simple renovation, they have a townhouse that has old carpet, old appliances, vinyl in the baths, where they're just going to replace everything. All I need is the budget.
Ooh, I have a question. Squirrel.
This
This is how my brain works. Well, because you mentioned earlier, like flooring is a gimme. So if there's an investor looking to like figure out what like the base bang for their buck, would you recommend on the appraisal side, like putting down flooring versus carpeting? Is that worth the extra money to put down flooring versus carpeting? The appraisal, will that matter? I don't know if I asked my question correctly.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good question. I just covered this on a vlog on my website. I took, I don't know, 400 different budgets that I have saved in my PC for all these fix and flips I've done, fed them into AI, got all the totals, and it pulled out how much these investors typically paid their subcontractors to do HVAC, roof, windows, flooring, bathrooms, kitchens. So what was your question again?
Who thought about carpet?
I was
and
asking like things like carpet versus LVP, like is the extra cost with putting LVP versus the carpeting, does it make is it a big enough difference, like bang for the buck?
I don't even know, what is carpeting, like $12 a square yard these days?
I don't think it's even that much, but I could be wrong. I haven't put carpet down in ages because I don't like carpet.
Neither have I.
I don't really see that. Maybe some new construction bedroom, like in Ryan or Pulte, I will see that occasionally, but everything is LVP or, the thin hardwood that they glue down. I don't really see the old standard 3/4 inch plank, Bruce hardwood going down anymore.
What is too hard? It's expensive and it's hard to maintain. They'd rather put the LVP that's like waterproof or water resistant and call it good.
Or
Especially-
even the authentic wood that is, similar thickness, they glue that down in high-end homes. I don't know how they refinish those. They're really thin.
I know that need to get down to the berry. You have to end replacing them.
I guess it's probably easier just to rip it up and redo it versus, having to sand down all your floors and
Try to color match, but
it's
okay.
reflected.
I'm glad we could have that. And I swear, I mean, I probably should have, but I have not gone to your blog. But I love how I'm like teeing up these questions, and you're like, about that. If you go to my blog,
Shameless plug. There we go. Mike, so
You want to hear something crazy? A lady called me 3-4 days ago, and it was about needing a date of death appraisal. I mean, an IRS appraisal for.
I was like, what's a date of death appraisal? I've never heard of those. Okay, that's a different question. Finish your story.
So she needed an IRS appraisal for her dad gifted her house, and I always ask, where did you find me? And she goes, ChatGPT recommended you. I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, when you get here, I'll show you the conversation we had. And it ranked 11 appraisers who do these appraisals. And it put me number 1
Look at that.
for the area. How cool is that?
That has been
Who was that person you said that like set up your like Google business and all that? You need to
SEO.
thank somebody.
Me, I did that. My
Oh.
friend is the one that urged me on to do that. But yeah, I do my own website, my own Google business profile. But ChatGPT pulled,
No,
they must have they got it from somewhere. No,
they
it's cool.
got your info.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Right?
We spoke a lot about people buying, whether it's a traditional buyer or an investor buying homes in the process of the appraisal. But I know that's just part of your business, and you do other private appraisals. You mind talking about that, like what that looks like, and how they can use it?
The aforementioned date of death appraisal is not something I like talking about, but with the people who call me. But when someone passes away, typically when the house is either willed to someone or someone else takes ownership of it, they need the appraised value of the house as of their passing.
No.
So I have to ask someone, when was the date of passing? And my comps can't be after that day. So if it was 2 years ago, the date I'll put in the appraisal is the effective date will be as of that date. And none of my comps can be after that date. It can be 10 years. Or there's other circumstances when you would need a retrospective appraisal, but typically they're day of death. The IRS appraisals are for someone who is gifted a house or if they need an audit as well. EMI removal appraisals, I just did one. If you got very happy, paying $380 a month. They don't like you where the lenders love EMI. It's free money. So when he called me and like 4 days, he got his appraisal back, moved me in with United Bank and submitted the appraisal. 2 days later, they said, yeah, you have 80% of the now. You will want that pay the amount. Congratulations all around.
That's awesome.
Besides that, I do pre-listing appraisals and the occasional county, someone wants to fight their assessment.
And I think before we got on camera, you mentioned something like if somebody's going through a divorce or something like that, they can get an appraisal level.
Divorce appraisal, how to forget about. Yeah, divorce appraisals are, I do a lot of those too.
Now, all those ones you just talked about, very sensitive timelines, or not timelines, sensitive homeowners or situation. I'd love to hear if you had any crazy stories, and we won't have to go about names of people, but
Yeah.
have you had anybody get angry with you on the
No.
industry?
Whoever is hiring me, I'm representing them in their interest in a divorce, especially. And not to toot my own horn, but I'm really good at what I do. And when I see some of these contested appraisals and I get to see the other side's appraisal, it makes me feel better because I know my appraisal will hold up more and do better for my client in court. And that's what it comes down to. It's one of the appraisals is usually going to get knocked out if it's contested. And if the other appraisal that may show a lower indicated value gets tossed out, then my client stands to gain from that. So spend a couple of dollars more. My divorce appraisals are $8.95. I do them in about 7 days. They're a typical like FHA appraisal or VA is $600. That's how much the VA puts on it. You can't charge more or less. So it says slight increase. It takes easily 2 to 3 times as long. And there's a lot more on the line. So it's kind of a bargain in this area because houses are expensive. And if things are contested, you want to have your ducks in a row. And that's what I provide. All of the rates are $5.9.
Okay, I was going to say that is of today, January 30th, 2026. If you listen to this in the future, prices are subject to change. I just want to put that disclaimer out there just in case.
And you're a pro.
Things around pretty much forever. I charge less to do private appraisals than I do VA appraisals. So I'm not out there, gouging anyone.
Well, I just think the VA may give you a raise one day. Who knows? Maybe. They could. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say was like, this is like 3 years from now, you may be retired on a beach somewhere or, just call him and make sure pricing is still the same.
Hopefully not. I love working. I love doing what I do.
Mike, I have a technical question about the appraisals. I remember the first time I saw one, I was like, what the heck am I looking at? And I was in the business, right? So how can somebody, like when they're reading an appraisal report, like understand what they're looking at?
The only page that really matters is the page that has the 3 comparables on it. We call that, appraisers call it the grid. It's also called page 2 of the appraisal. Typically, appraisals will have an invoice page, a cover page. The first page is the meat of the subject property, the neighborhood, the lot. It describes the house itself. Page 2 is all about the comparables that you use. And at the bottom of page 2, you have your indicated values after adjusting. And at the very bottom, you'll have your appraised value. That page is the only is the page that matters most. Everything else is addendums, requirements, certifications, maps, photos, things like that.
That page that you talked about, like page 2, will have the 3 comps and like columns, right? And then the value or what they were sold at. And then I think in one little column, it says the actual appraised value on page 2. Is that accurate?
Yeah, at the bottom. Yeah, we have at the top of the grid, you have each comp's sale price. And then when you go down the grid, each thing may or may not be adjusted positively or negatively. And when you get to the bottom of the grid, you have the adjusted sale prices that closely match what your subject property's contract price should be. And at the very bottom, when you reconcile everything, you come up with your appraised opinion of value and the date it was inspected.
Okay. Now, the only reason why I bring that up is, a lot of times I would say 95% of the time, if you get the green light and it passes the appraisal, nobody even really looks at your report as long as you get the green light. But for the nerds like us, if you want to kind of look at the appraisal, that's kind of the format, right?
Yeah. Now, no one has ever called me after our house said, great job on that appraisal, but that's happened 0 times in my life.
Awesome. So Mike, we are running close on time. I wanted to hit you with a few final questions. So you've been in the appraisal business for, I think you said 33 years, and I'm sure it's changed a lot. What would you say has been the difference from when you first started to what it looks like today?
Not having to stand in front of a 1-hour photo waiting for my picture to be developed.
No.
Not having to draw sketches on graph paper for my floor plans. We used to have on our map pages, we used to have these arrows that we'd rub off onto physical copies of the neighborhood map book page. So it's definitely come a long way. I was one of the first persons to get a digital camera. It was as soon as they made it, I don't know, 94 maybe, as soon as they said we could start using those, it was an AGFA German camera. It was the size of a brick. Its resolution was 640 by 480. I mean, it looked like graphics from that one video
like
game.
Nintendo game.
It was so bad. It held like 30 photos and it was a grand, but I didn't have to sit in my car in front of 1 hour photos anymore. Thank the Lord. I needed that. That was the worst part. There's a new form coming out called the 3.6 UAD form, and it's supposed to be a September or November rollout, which is going to change things dramatically. You're probably going to be seeing a few less appraisers around, is my guess, because if you're not inspecting homes on this new form that asks for a crazy amount of detail, if you're not inspecting on one of these, it's going to get very complicated. It's going to get very complicated because of the amount of data we're going to have to start logging through these homes that we inspect. You have to measure door opening height. You have to measure ceiling height, window height, window size. It's really different. It's really different.
That sucks for those older homes that have like every window is a different size.
And unfortunately, the older appraisers who don't want to make this technological leap, they want to take pictures. You put your inspection on the front of a file and go home and type it up. I don't think you're going to be able to do that after this form rolls out. Maybe they'll delay it, but they've been working on it for years, so who knows?
Sure.
Technology changes every industry, and you got to keep up.
Yeah, I like tech, so bring it on.
Okay. Mike, what is one tip that every real estate investor should know about appraisals?
We're not the bad guy. We're just reporting what the market is showing. Typically, I don't really see any investors getting hurt in this area. They seem to be doing quite well. The problem is finding properties. Everybody is getting bombarded with, I'll buy your house for cash today. I don't know how they're still out there, but I still do them. There's a lot of homes in this area. So eventually one day there's not going to be any more investment. Everything's going to have gray LVT.
They're all starting to look the same, right?
You guys know what you're doing. You just want an honest opinion on what it's going to be like when the renovations are done. That's what I do. I guess that's what most appraisers do. Appraisers don't really know a lot of other appraisers. We're kind of reclusive like that. We typically work by ourselves in our basement. You might go to a gathering here or there once or twice a year at that. But I know personally 4 appraisers. Yeah. We're not like real. There's no people up on Capitol Hill that work for us. No, we're always the bad guy.
Appraisal happy hour where everybody, all the appraisers meet up.
When the market tanks, it's the appraisers' fault, and new legislation is always aimed at the appraisers. So whatever.
It's a team at Fair Wheel, and communication is important. And I think those pro tips that you talked about earlier, the plat, comps, recent upgrades, everything that you can do to provide to the appraiser, not expecting them to use those comps, but just do your due diligence if you're an investor, if you're an agent, and appraisers are people too, right?
One last thing, it's a pet peeve of mine. If I'm calling to set up an inspection, and it's only rarely you meet the realtor who insists on being there, which is totally fine. But if the house is on a lockbox and someone insists on being there and they're like, I can't do it when you want to do it. Can we do it at like 5:30 this afternoon? No. scheduling geographically. I'm trying to get everybody in so I can get your stuff. Well, my client really wants me to be there. I said, if you really, really have to be there, we're going to have to do it next week. So if at all possible, let your, people know that if the appraiser wants to get in, let's do everything we can to get him in. So we get on the clock, because until he does that or she does that inspection, the clock doesn't even start. Since once it's inspected, then the lender can say, you were out there 4 days ago. Where's my appraisal?
Yeah.
You haven't even gone out there yet because you can't get in. That's what holds up things a lot. So if the house is on the lockbox, please let me go when I try to go. I have my own lockbox access. You guys can get, 1-day codes. But I understand you have some sellers who are just like, I don't want you letting an appraiser in unless you're here.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mike, because contracts are on timeline. If you have to push an appraisal back a week, your window
Delay
for
closing.
your appraisal contingency, a delayed closing or your appraisal contingency can, not be there. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Work with them. If they need to get in, the sooner the better.
Now, let me ask you guys a question, because I've always wondered this. Why does everyone seem to not throw a fit, but have a massive problem with delaying closing? What's wrong with delaying closing a day or two?
It depends.
Lenders like doing it. Realtors don't like doing it. I get that more from lenders than probably anything. We can't delay closing. When is this coming in today? I get that from lenders day of it's due on the regular.
Well,
Just check it, make sure we're on time.
I would say every situation's a little different, Mike. If there's a buyer that needs to be in the home because their lease is ending, like that might be something that we need to make sure that we're setting to closing on that actual date. Selfishly,
The seller.
or the seller as well.
Yes. If they have a house under contract that they need to sell this one in order to buy the next one, and they can't, like if they push the closing here, they may drop out of contract and avoid that. I mean, so there's different situations, not saying all of them are like that, but there are situations like that where if they don't close on time, they lose the house they're under contract for, or the buyer may be homeless because their lease is over. It happens.
And agents want to get paid, Mike.
Yeah. But realtors are, an appraiser is late, and it does happen. It's a day, maybe 2 days, but it just, that typically the lender can recover, but the lender and the realtor having to wait one extra day, that just seems like that's frowned upon with you guys.
That wouldn't be a deal. It wouldn't be
hey, Mr. Lender, what happened to my closing?
I'll speak for myself that a 2-day delay is not a deal breaker for me, unless those situations we just talked about where we're, 2 transactions or they need to be out of their lease and they need to buy the property. Then, it's always the client's best interest.
Yeah, I will say we also don't talk to you guys directly normally. So a lot of times, like the lender is the one that's like, well, the appraisal taking too long. So, I mean, is that true? I don't know. I assume they're telling the truth, but like, I just had my lender, like, I'm freaked out this morning because I'm like, where's the clear to close? Like, we close on Monday. And he like, oh, the appraiser had to make some corrections. And I didn't realize it took him so long. And it just came back yesterday. I assume that's true. I trust the lender, but I don't know. I haven't talked to the appraiser. So it could also be shit rolled downhill. And
100%. You can have a processor who dropped the ball. You could have an appraiser who dropped the ball.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say you're not allowed to call an appraiser. If you have something and the lender says, he's had the corrections for 4 days,
uh-huh.
From a text, say, hey, just checking to see if, we're trying to get this thing closed. My people they're facing a closing on a sale of their house. It's okay to do that. I always respond when I get those.
I never thought about that. Do agents actually ask their lender for who the appraiser is? And
cut out the middleman, Anna.
POC? Have you done that before?
I have not. It's a phone.
I was like,
but the listing agent.
Yes, the listing agent. Although when I contacted the listing agent, she goes, he didn't come back. So that's why I was like, wait a minute. I'm very confused because supposedly he had to go back for correction. And she's like, well, he didn't contact me to go back in the house. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. And I'm like,
Well, I mean, but you have a listing. Don't all appraisers use showing time?
Oh,
Most of the time, a short
most of the
time, or
time,
they need
Yeah.
a code for the
or they need a
lockbox.
code. Yeah, I think I had one appraiser one time that I just met him there because he's like, "Can you meet me there and let me in?" And that was the one that was like, "Can you keep the buyer or the sellers away from me?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay," but he was an older gentleman, like
Yeah.
not being ageist or anything.
Yeah. No, once they do that, they have my name, email address, and cell phone. You can get it that way.
I guess I was thinking from the buyer side. Like in this case, I'm representing the buyers for this closing on Monday. So that's why I was like, what do you mean the appraisal delayed? Like what happened? I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Typically, a listing agent will be like, "Yeah, sure. If this is the appraiser, give him a call."
Now I know. Duh.
All right, Mike. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Where can people, I know you shouted out your website, where can people reach out to you if they had any questions or looking for your services,
Or follow you
Oh.
on social media.
or following on social media if you have any?
No, just my website and Google. But well, actually, I do. I have Instagram, dcmetroappraisals.com. My website is dcmetroappraisals.com, obviously. My number is 703-350-2542, and email is mtg@myappraisalservice.
Cool. Awesome, Mike. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We'll definitely have to have you come on for part 2. But that's going to do it for another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast. Please like, share, subscribe if you found any value. And you can reach out to me at Garcia Official on all social platforms. And you can reach out to Anna at.
I'm _realtor and Bialek everywhere.
All right, guys. Tune into the next one.
Thank
Nice
you.
meeting you guys.